from you, Sam, and perhaps some more perspective on even issues like voter turnout with Angela.
Right, and of course, you might be wondering, or a viewer may be wondering, why they're just presidential election results and then members of parliament. Remember that the procedure of counting from the polling stations, you begin with the presidential, then you go to the member of National Assembly, then MCA, then you go to the other seats, governor, senator, then woman representative. I don't know that it's the same order that is followed at the constituency tallying center, because remember that the constituency returning officer has to declare the winners for the MCA seats, but also MP seats. So that's why you're hearing this, because now the returning officers of the constituency, they have to finalize that so that they can leave the returning officer to go to the Bomas of Kenya to take the Form 34As as well as Form 34B to the National Tallying Center, and then the deputy returning officer to go ahead and deliver the county the county returns for the governorship, senate, and woman representative, but also the returning officer of the constituency has to declare the MCA seats. And I was just looking at some of the variables. Something has changed, Yvonne, as we were speaking. We're now reporting 23,193. That's 50% of the polling stations across the country. And actually, if you look at the voter turnout at 31.26%, it almost tallies with what IBC is saying, because the turnout, they're talking about 64%. If we're at 50%, if you double that, it will get close to 62%. And let's talk about that, Angela, because during your research, sometimes you'd report that 95% are reporting that they are intending to vote. That may sort of indicate that there are plans that the turnout could go higher than what you're reporting now. What could have happened between the surveys versus the actual outcome?
I think, Sam, one of the things that may have caused the low turnout is one of the things that was mentioned by the Prof earlier, which was some of the court rulings that happened right before, almost, the eve of the election, leaving very many people confused. I mean, people who are learned enough to discern but are not lawyers were really confused about what was going to be happening. And then there was also the announcement in terms of the ballot papers. Remember that the stakes are such that when you're going to vote, you want to vote for the president, but you're also very keen on the governor and all those other elective seats. So you can imagine that for the people in Mombasa and the people in Kakamega, it was somewhat shocking to learn just on the eve of the election that was not going to happen. It could have had a ripple effect, not just on the two counties, but other places as well. But what we've also, learned from the electorate is that the issue of high cost of living, the economy, and just feeling disenfranchised has made many people just ask themselves, am I really going to gain anything by voting? I don't feel. I was talking to someone as I was coming to the studio, and they said, I didn't vote because I just didn't feel it as much. I thought I would, but in the end, that call to action wasn't convincing enough for some people to actually get out and vote. Yeah.
When you take a look at the turnout, that's 14,164,561 voters of the registered 22.12 million. That means there's about 8 million people who didn't turn up to vote. Now, we don't yet know, because we haven't done exit polls in this country, why some of them chose not to go and vote. But what in your data from the people who, there were questions about where people feel the country is headed, whether they had trust and confidence, in the electoral process. What were some of the reasons that came out of the survey with respect to maybe the undecideds, or even the people who said, I will absolutely not go and vote? What were they saying?
Yvonne, for the people who generally felt that they were not confident or not sure about voting, one of the issues was confidence with the electoral body and electoral management. And so this is exacerbated by some of the pronouncement we saw just before the election. So already you have lack of confidence, and then there are all these things that are just getting you somewhat confused, and you decide not to. In terms of the direction the country is taking, 70%, I think in the last survey we did, indicated that they felt the country was headed in the wrong direction. That has not changed. Indeed, you have people saying, am I going to spend 200 shillings to travel to a polling station when I need to eat, when I need to feed my family. It was very different when it was campaign time, because during the campaign period, politicians were facilitating the electorate. On voting day, at least this time round, whether it was by default or design, it seems that the politicians didn't bring out any facilitation that at least ensured that people could get to the polling centers that they needed to go and vote at. So it is really a cost benefit, asking yourself, are you going to spend money to go and vote for someone who may not in the end deliver what it is that you expect from a good leader, or are you going to spend that money to ensure that your kids get what they need to survive for the day? So I think that issue is something that is going to be very critical for the new incoming leadership to deal with. The fact that you have such high apathy in terms of a populace, because life has become almost impossible for most Kenyans.
Just before we move, and I'll circulate the question, could it be that you're getting back to where we should be? Because I look at the 2002 general election, the vote turnout was 57%. And Mwai Kibaki went ahead to win 62% of the vote. I'm not certain about 2007, but 2013, it really went high. Let's just get it here so that we don't misquote it. 83%. I think this is the highest in a general election. If you look at 2017, it went down a little bit to 77 point, point something. 78. Okay, let's call it 78%.
Yeah, okay.
And in this election, you're reporting, this is wrong.
Yeah, that's Kakamega County.
We have 64.
You could go to the national.
Yes, but if Nyeri, for instance, if Martin Munene's assessment is correct, generally across the 6 constituencies, they're reporting about 50%. Never mind the running mate of one of the leading presidential candidates comes from that region. Are we then getting back to, we don't care so much about elections, or what is happening, and what is that factor that Mount Kenya or Rift Valley may have played in 2013 and 17?
But you do know that we had projected, we didn't quite think it would be as low as 50, but we had projected that Mount Kenya was going to register lower voter turnout than any other region. And that is simply because for this particular election, they did not have a presidential candidate. So, of course, it brings to question the strength and power that emanates from a running mate, as was the case for Martha Karua and Gachagua.
Right.
But we didn't anticipate that it was going to be as low as what you're calling. We had thought it would go down by 10%. Now, on the flip side, I think it is correct in the assertion you're making is actually quite true, in the sense that we are using numbers. In fact, I was chuckling when you were using 2017 numbers, because those numbers have been, in essence, discredited, isn't it? We can't quite verify whether they were accurate or not. But because we don't have any base, that's what we use. And indeed, again, when you talk about 2007, where the turnout was, I think, 69%, again, that was an election that was contested. I don't think that the turnout in 2007 was incorrect. I think it was the results were fiddled with.
Okay.
But in terms of turnout, in an election that was really highly anticipated, it was about 70%.
Okay.
Did we have the same issues? Not quite. This time round, I think we are grappling with the issues we had in 2002, when the economy was almost on its knees, and we were then really hopeful that, a NAC coming in would actually just revive the country, which it did. This time round, I think what this is suggesting is that same feeling, that same enthusiasm is lacking. It is not there. It has not, the inspiration has not come out as much from the campaigning of the two luminaries that they would actually, whether it is bottom up or the 6,000 stipend or whatever economic rejuvenation will happen from the Azimio side, has not inspired people enough that they would come out to vote in large numbers.
And Prof, is there any possibility of a country getting back, allow me to use this term, getting back to its senses, and citizens realizing, especially the younger generation, realizing that they have a responsibility? Yes, things may not be working, but they have a duty to make that happen. Or this is a cause that we're losing? as generations pass?
Is there a possibility? Yes, but it will not happen on its own. It requires real hard work, because even as we talk about the turnout, 65% is not a crisis. But if you take into account that the voter register itself showed us that the percentage of young people who had registered had plummeted from 2017. It gone down. If you spoke with people across the divide yesterday, they would be telling you, I am not going to vote. I know friends who are walking in a town, and you find people in the market, but nobody is bothering to go to the polling station. Eventually, the message that citizens are passing is that they don't feel their leadership. I was talking to a young girl in Kileleshwa Primary, and the girl told me that, it doesn't matter whether I vote or not, because, first of all, the elections are not credible. Number two, the outcome does not lead to a change in my life. Then I joked with her and said, but I know of older people who are actually still going to vote despite those challenges. Yet, you as a young person, the future of this country is in your hands. I think the point that we need to get to is a point where, as leaders, the leaders recognize that this country is sliding in the wrong direction in terms of governance. That you have citizens who are feeling apathetic. I think offline we were having the debate that if you also look at the quality of people who are coming into leadership, it's very nice to see the professor who was speaking, but she is the exception. The quality of our leaders who are coming into leadership increasingly becomes socialites, increasingly becomes people who can impress in terms of, you hear people saying, I'll vote for Yvonne because she looks nice. So it's about impressing people as opposed to content. And I think that becomes danger in terms of the quality of governance. If this election, you saw a situation where citizens and people are lining up to be given money. Before, you would give 10,000 shillings to Angela to distribute to people. Here, it was lines. And lines across the country. I think that kind of situation cannot be sustainable for democracy. And it's something that I think after this election, I was saying yesterday, we need to address it and address it wholesomely. If we continue pretending about it, it's a time bomb waiting to explode.
And tell me, for the people who choose not to vote, so again, like I said, we don't know why they chose not to, or what were their specific reasons. But there's been a push towards telling people that voting is your right, and if you do this, then you have a say in the running of your government and the running of your affairs. But a refusal to vote is also a message in itself. Koki, have we not listened to that message, but rather we've been harping on about go and vote, make sure you go out there and do that, without actually saying, okay, but people don't want to vote, and that's a message. Are we listening to that, or perhaps understanding that 8 million people, if let's say all of them decided that we don't want to vote because the system is rigged anyway, it almost feels like sometimes we don't listen to that protest, a silent protest, but instead just hammer people to go and do it and say it's a failing on their part. I don't know.
Well, thank you, Yvonne. Perhaps we should be discussing that issue of whether we should make voting compulsory or not.
Should we?
Which is another conversation.
Yeah.
But just to come back to the issue that you raise, and I don't want to repeat the same points, I agree with them completely. But it is important to remember that by telling people to just go and vote, you have to be able to communicate. You see, for example, we used to go to vote without anybody telling us. That is a sense of responsibility and citizenry. That as a citizen, it is my duty to choose my leaders, and therefore so that I can hold them accountable and so that they can be able to work. Like our parents, our grandparents, they took it very seriously. And even when they were sick, they went to vote. Because for them, it is a very important national duty. This kind of civics and responsibility is actually lacking in our younger generation.
But why is it lacking?
And because of so many things that have happened. I mean, there are so many factors. For example, if you look at I had to make my daughter to go and vote She wanted to vote for a few people. But I told her that it is important for you to go and vote. And she told me, Mom, there is nothing new that is going to change in my life if I vote. So you see, there is a core relationship between the voter and the voted. Because what is it that they are saying, for example, what is going to change? Baba has been there many times. The DP was DP before. And what are they going to do that is significantly different from when they were there? And also the concept of associating yourself with your political leaders, there's a big disconnect, because a lot of people feel that the leaders don't represent, or they don't speak for them, or they don't care about their interest. Because they say, if you vote for these people, how many sufrias, like Shikuku used to say, will it bring into your kitchen? And people are looking at that. And this idea, and Angela, I think, mentioned it earlier, this idea of politicians trying, paying, facilitating people to go for campaigns, when it is time to vote, without necessarily inculcating into the voters the importance of carrying it through to the election day and making sure they vote. What happens is that many people say, listen, when they wanted me to go to their rally, they took me, they facilitated us. And when we went, we were given kitu kidogo. Now they want me to vote for them. How do they expect me to go on my own? Siwafanye vile. So this is a terrible culture that we are starting, the culture of trying to facilitate people. And there's also the other issue. During transitions, or when you are getting a new, like in 2002, there was a very high voter turnout for obvious reasons. In 2013, there was also a very high voter turnout. There are several things or factors in the country that actually stimulate participation in elections. Like you can see the specific times. In 1992, there was also a high voter turnout because of that. But from 92 to 2002, there was just, kawaida. And then 2002, there was a higher voter turnout and so on. But then there is another, last issue that I wanted to raise. It's also the issue of the specific presidential candidates and also the voters register itself. We used to know from the audits, I don't know what the KPMG audit came up with, because sometimes when you have like 22 million people, I mean, some have died, some have transitioned, and some have moved out of the country, others are moved in different places by the time. So you know exactly actually how many people are in the register who are likely to vote at that election. So there are very many factors that determine the voter turnout. And also, of course, there is the issue of right now, I mean, because of 700 voters and the distance is being shorter, people walk to polling stations. There are very many, and they are very near.
Easily accessible.
But it's not an issue of that. It's an issue of the disconnect between leadership and citizenry. That social contract no longer exists.
Okay.
So people will vote because I'm excited. Yvonne is a candidate, so I will come and I'll vote for you because I'm your supporter. But he may not feel the same. That enthusiasm is not there anymore.
I want to just sort of switch gears a little bit because, you've observed elections in the region. I'm sure you have seen some of these jokes that have been going around. Let me read you one tweet from, I believe is a Tanzanian. Ole Mtetezi says, kwamba Kenya mpaka sasa hawatumii VPN. Kwamba rais hajawaambia wasimamizi wa uchaguzi, nimekuajiri mimi, nimekupa gari na kulipa mshahara, ole wako mtangaze mpinzani. Kwamba mpaka sasa hatujasikia polisi wamekimbia na maboksi ya kura. Inawezekanaje? Hivi Kenya iko Afrika kweli? And there is this one in Tanzania. I have relations in Uganda who are just really looking at us like, you guys have actually put your information out on a portal. So yes, things are imperfect, but what is your perspective about where Kenya ranks, on the continent, in the region, with respect to how we conduct our elections? Of course, when we're looking in, we're like, this is not perfect, this didn't work, we over-litigated here. But how do we compare to the region and in other places that you've seen?
I would say, Yvonne, that we are way, way ahead. I can say that without any fear of contradiction, even ahead of countries like the United States, countries also abroad. I have watched the elections in the United States, and I can tell you, of the 50 states that they have, each state has its own ways of doing elections. And I watch and I'm mesmerized. In 2005, I watched the election in the UK. And I observed the election in the UK. They call them study tours because they don't imagine they can be observed. But imagine the election is conducted by local authorities. Okay, maybe you can say they have more confidence in the people who conduct elections and so on. And of course, the trust is high and so on, or there are concerns. But I watched the people who are conducting that election discuss the issue of postal ballots, saying that in one apartment building, the postman and somebody from one of the apartments sort of got all this mail, all these ballots, and voted for like 15 or 20 people living in the same apartment building. And I'm like, these people, are you listening to this? I mean, this is abroad where they are democratic. But I can tell you, I have watched elections, and I'm celebrating 30 years of observation of elections since 1992. And I can tell you, we have changed exponentially. We started from very opaque systems until now we are way, way ahead. In most countries abroad, and even they don't use technology to conduct elections. Here in Kenya, we use technology in 3 ways: for registration of voters, for identification, and for transmission of the results. And you can see the level of transparency in these processes is quite high. And also the way we legislate and regulate our elections, the way you are saying the electoral commissioners and the staff are very careful. The level of training, the level of advancement, the level of capacity is actually quite high. And I must say we are democratic. It's just that Kenyans, we want more because we have really fought and won ourselves wherever we are. But on a level of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, we are really by 8, 9 there. We have done so well in the world. And as people joke, and your relatives in Tanzania and Uganda, for them, they are actually mesmerized. My colleagues in South Sudan and in Tanzania tell me that you mean you can question that?
Yes.
You mean the judge can say that?
Right.
You mean the police?
Anyone can go to court if they're unhappy with any aspect of how we conduct our elections.
Yesterday during an election, during our election, there was a small scuffle in the polling station because a drunk person came in and was trying to cause problems. So the security guy came and started talking to him, and I couldn't believe the security gentleman, the security officer, talked to this man so nicely. I mean, I flashed back, the first time I encountered a security person speaking to a voter. And this guy was telling me, please walk with me outside. And I'm like, grab this pen. I was like, And then in another polling station, a security officer came to speak to the presiding officer to say the queue is growing very long, and then started, doing some work. So I beckoned to the to the presiding officer that maybe the security officer need not be inside with a gun and so on.
Yeah.
Some voters may be intimidated.
Yeah.
And so he actually beckoned, signaled without causing attention. And he told the gentleman, do you know the security officer apologized and walked outside and went where the presiding officer. This for me is a realization of a dream, because the entire process of transforming the electoral process has been a significant journey, which we have actually managed to achieve a lot. I wanted to make just one comment about court cases, and saying that I'm not, I shouldn't, well, I should make this comment because now we are free, I can speak. But I think that the courts have actually caused a lot of confusion in the electoral process. And I can give you, for example, last year, the court declared unconstitutional the requirement that MCAs require a degree to vie. But they didn't declare unconstitutional the qualification that is connected to MCA. For example, Article 180, subsection 2 of the Constitution says that a governor qualifies the same way as an MCA to run. So if you declare that they don't need a degree, then consequently, a governor will not require a degree. That has two things. It confuses everybody because a governor actually did not require a degree to vie for election because their qualification is pegged to that one of an MCA. And then the second thing is, do we want our governors vying without a degree? Because, of course, the reason why that provision was put in the Constitution was for obvious reason that the nature of the work that they are going to do requires some kind of competencies to manage the resources that will be coming to them and so on and so forth. Anyway, too many confusion.
Yeah.
Very diverse perspectives to this conversation. But Daktari, okay, all right. I'm told that we need to go to Crispin, who is in
Nyaribari Chache, which is in Kisii County. Crispin, is it good evening or it's actually good morning? Oh, it is. Look at that.
We've spoken to you for so many times. I wonder when you sleep, but what is happening in Nyaribari Chache?
Well, good morning, I suppose. We are coming to you live from Kisii School, Kisii National School. This is the main constituency tallying center for Nyaribari Chache here in Kisii County. And as you can see, IEBC officials are literally burning the midnight oil here. They're still trying to ensure that they tabulate as many results as possible. However, nothing much is happening because so far out of a total number of 186 polling centers within Nyaribari Chache, the IBC officials have so far managed to tabulate results from 60 polling centers. And as you can see from on my left here, this is the situation right here. These are just ballot boxes that have just arrived from different polling centers. And you can see it's already packed up around a kilometer from where we are. So it means it's an activity which is likely to go until tomorrow. That's how the situation is right here. Earlier on, we managed to, traverse various parts of Kisii County. For instance, we were in Kitutu Chache South. In Kitutu Chache South, a total number of those who are registered as voters stood at 66,000. 906. And also in Kitutu Church South, the situation was no difference from what we are seeing here, because out of total number of polling centers, which stood at 126, by 6 p.m. they only managed to tabulate results from 35 polling centers. It means even in Kitutu Church South, they are likely to go away until tomorrow, so that they ensure that at least they can manage to tabulate more than 60% of the total results. However, in Kitutu Church South, there was a bit of confrontation between some aspirants who are calling out on IBC official to tell them how some of the ballot boxes were allegedly found in one of the private cars somewhere in Nyankongo within Kisii Township, and it led to a bit of confrontation between IBC official and also the aspirants who demanded to know why the process was was being interfered with, according to some of the aspirants we were managed to spoke to. However, the same scenario was also replicated in Bonchari, where we saw a confrontation also between police officers and the supporters of various candidates in Bonchari. However, the officers managed to swing into action, and they managed to calm down agitated protesters. So in Kisii County, as I had earlier on indicated, it has a total number of registered voters, 637,010. And remember, so far, we've not managed to clear with the constituency tallying centers, where we've not had any constituency declaring results for those other constituencies, those that have completed the tabulation of results 100%. So we are expecting this exercise to proceed way up to on Friday. That's when we shall be able to know who exactly is leading in which particular constituency. Tomorrow we shall still continue traversing the entire Kisii County, and for the last 3 days we've been oscillating between Kisii and Nyamira, just to ensure that we follow up how the results are streaming as far as the general election is concerned in Busiland. Remember, in Kisii County, one of the most hotly contested seats is the gubernatorial race, which attracted 7 candidates. We are also, probably planning again. We believe by Friday we shall already know who is ahead and who is trailing. So it's an issue we are still following up on some, and we shall update you as at when we receive those results at the constituency level, as well as the gubernatorial races.
All right, thank you so much, Crispin, for that update about Kisii County, specifically Nyaribari Chache, but also the other county seats, specifically on the governorship race. And of course, we'll be sure to join you as soon as you have more details for us. But for now, enjoy your night because you need to rest. Let's take a look at some of the results that are coming through from the Lower Eastern region, and we'll be sure to compare these with the final release of InfoTrack. Angela Mbitho is here. Machakos County, let me begin there. It's the 6th largest in terms of voter population in the country, 687,000 registered voters. So far, you've tallied 552 polling stations out of 1,472. That should be about a third or so, and it's showing that Raila Odinga has 73% of the vote, while William Ruto has 24.8%. And I'm looking at the release from InfoTrack. Yes, I got it. 72% for Raila Odinga versus William Ruto was projected to get 16%. There were 9% that were undecided. So, well, almost on point for Raila Odinga. For William Ruto, slightly gone up at 24%. Look at that. In 2017, it was at 17%. So 7 percentage points increase. I don't know whether that's attributable to the relationship between almost not, because in 2017, I think Mendeleo Chapchap was still working with the Jubilee Party and still working with William Ruto. Let's look at Kitui County here. Talking about Raila Odinga, 70%. The final release was talking about 68%, so not so far. 22% for William Ruto, according to the release. The outcome so far, 26%. If you look at Makueni County, Makueni is here, the release was talking about 74% for Raila Odinga, slightly higher, 78%. William Ruto, it was estimated to be about 21%. It's now at 19%. Not very far, but also we know that a lot of seats in this area have gone to Wiper. Angela, your reaction to what's showing here versus your projection, then also the Kalonzo factor, especially for Azimio la Umoja in this region, based on what you're seeing.
I think, Sam, I'm very happy this early morning that the polls have been vindicated. I mean, you're reading the numbers and they're almost a mirror, aside from the undecided, which could have gone either way. But for the leading candidate here, the numbers are just within the margin of error. So it is really just suggesting that people did tell us the truth with regards to their intentions. It is a Wiper stronghold. And indeed, Kalonzo Musyoka can be applauded for delivering Lower Eastern. He's certainly, held to his end of the bargain. And I think on the other seats, the other elective seats, it will really be more Wiper than anything else. So that perhaps will also go towards his negotiating power when, he either is in the new government or even if he's in opposition, he will have that, very strong position as the luminary from the region. I don't know, Koki, you come from that region, but I think Kalonzo is sitting pretty right now, having delivered. Whichever way it goes, I think Kalonzo will be a happy man.
Just before Koki, you said something. Angela, let me refer you to something else. This is, sorry, I didn't brief you about this, but this is in Bungoma. William Ruto is posting 64%. Based on your last release, it was almost 40-something to 40-something. I know you don't like that. Let me just get the actual figure.
Are you sure? I think I put red, eh?
Yeah?
Was it red or yellow?
You named it a battleground? Let's see, Western. Yeah. This is Bungoma. You were saying that Raila Odinga would get 46%, William Ruto would get 43%.
Yeah.
So far, based on our tabulation, 64% is going to William Ruto, 33% is going to Raila Odinga. I don't know what to say about that.
Well, it's interesting. I would like to see what happens when you have 2/3. You've only done a third.
Yeah.
So when you have 2/3, then we can talk. But having said that, I think what it is suggesting, which is correct, is that William Ruto had made, good inroads into Bungoma, and that's why we were calling it a battleground. It could have gone either way, and even now, when you finish off with your 1,373, I believe I will not be surprised if Ruto is, stands taller than Raila in Bungoma. I would not be surprised.
No, but maybe finally for you, how then does all the surveys, yes, but also the campaigns that we see, the very huge crowds, and should I say chest thumping, what then does it say in terms of who is receiving that message and who is appearing to vote?
I think if you recall, Sam, the last leg of the campaigns, there were proclamations made that were, in certain cases, I think, working at cross purposes for the different campaign teams. We saw Azimio coming out and chastising the people in Bungoma and saying, how can you do this? Why are you doing this? Now that is
shame on you.
Shame on you. You said it. But shame on you can work to your advantage or not, depending on how one receives it. What these numbers are showing us is that it may have meant, you're telling me shame on me. Wacha nitakuonyesha. Yeah? Or on the flip side, there are people who may have woken up from it and said, in hindsight and in retrospect, perhaps we should give this a thought because these are elders. There were 2 elders talking to them and saying, please reflect carefully. So I think the rhetoric in the campaign sometimes does have an effect, especially because not so much of the rallies themselves, but the effect of what you people do, which is making the rest of us see it. So we as a country then gets to see what was said in those rallies. And that's where the power of the rallies comes in. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah. Carry on.
And Prof, and let me tell you this, because earlier on we spoke about the disconnect between the leadership of this country and the citizens. The last time there was a serious conversation, allow me to say this, 2010 Constitution, everyone was almost on board. The voter turnout was 72%. We passed a constitution that talks about public participation. What then is happening between that time and now that even these crowds are nothing about public participation, never mind the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, they framed it that they are involving the people to come up with it. What is that disconnect that is making Kenyans to reach that point that, yes, we'll listen to you, we'll cheer you on if it's on social media, but we won't vote, and when we vote, we won't vote for you? What's happening, and how do you resolve this moving forward?
I think before talking about public participation, let me just make a short comment also on Bungoma, because my colleague spoke about Kalonzo and Lower Eastern.
Right.
I think those figures of Bungoma also show you from the early figures are between the Ford Kenya leader, Moses Wetangula,
Yes.
and the ANC leader, Musalia Mudavadi. Moses Wetangula seems to be doing better for the Kenya Kwanza side. Seems to have delivered. So whichever way, the same way Angela said, whichever way the elections goes, Kalonzo has a huge say in Azimio. Whichever way it goes, Moses Wetangula he has bragging rights in Kenya Kwanza because he can say, I delivered, and the figures talk about that. Let's go back to public participation. I think when we adopted the 2010 Constitution, there was a lot of excitement. Remember, it came in 8 years after Kenyans were judged to be the most optimistic. So the 2010 Constitution was transformative. People saw chief justices being asked to go home. People saw substantial changes. So a lot of Kenyans were hopeful, and the desire was that we would be more engaged in governance. I think 10 years down the road, people are reaching the stage where they say, it was good while we waited, if you remember that story. Because now they realize that, by the way, this participation is transactional.
Yeah.
It's not quality. They will put something up to say that we have been involved, but the main reason why it's being put up is A, to give us some transport allowance, and even for us to get transport allowance. Whatever we say is not important. I spent the last 2 weeks going around the country doing some work on something completely different from elections. Okay. And one of the things you got, both from the local officials and the citizens, is where is the transport allowance. Because citizens have known that the rest of the discussions don't mean anything. All that is required is the attendance sheet. People come with preconceived notions. As long as you've taken, they will still do what they require. And then people look and tell themselves, look, you've been given X amount of shillings to do Y for us. When we look at the final outcome, 70% of that money has been siphoned. So what it was supposed to do does not make sense. So citizens are saying, these conversations is a pretense to enable you to get money. So as opposed to worrying myself, I will quickly get a part of that money. So unfortunately, public participation is increasingly being commercialized, and it's something we need to get back to as a country, because you can't engage in governance only if citizens say we don't care about elections because election doesn't seem to have outcomes. Then they also say, but throughout the 5 years, because engaging in governance is not on the 8th of August,
yes,
it's the second.
What happens in between.
What happens in between.
Right.
But what happens in between, the leadership, you will hear people who, once he's elected, he comes to Nairobi, he disappears for 3 years. On the 4th year, he comes back to do many things. He's now building roads.
The
transaction is taking place.
Yeah.
That cannot be a democracy that we can be able to sustain.
Okay, and indeed a word we're now hearing increasingly is not just public participation, but it's public engagement. So it's, sort of, two-way as opposed to one way. We'll see what happens with that. But let's get another result. Ben Kirui is in Narok East constituency, where, Ben, we understand there's a final result with respect to the constituency results for the member of National Assembly. Ben?
Naam, bila shaka Yvonne, tuliahidi mtazamaji wetu kwamba tutakuwepo hadi dakika ya mwisho. Wakati walipiga kura, hesabu zikahesabiwa, na sasa washindi wanaanza kutangazwa. Katika eneo la Narok East, mbunge ambaye ni mbunge wa sasa Aramat Lemaken ameweza kutetea kiti chake kwa kuzoa kura 13,530 88 akimbwaga mpinzani wake wa karibu Alfred Kerio Lale wa chama cha ODM ambaye amemfuata na kura 8702 na vile vile watatu wakija ni Kipas Lengwes ambaye ni wa chama cha Jubilee ambaye alipata kura 8530. Kwa hivyo hiyo ndio nambari ya chini, ama hiyo ndio ile ambayo ameweza kujizolea huyu mbunge Aramat Lemaken, ambapo wakati wowote kuanzia sasa wale maafisa wa IEBC returning officer ataweza kumtangaza rasmi na kuweza kumkabidhi cheti cha ushindi. Kwa hivyo hiyo ndio matokeo ya hivi punde kutoka katika eneo hili la Narok East. Kutoka hapa tutaweza kuelekea sehemu nyingine tujue pia kule Narok North mambo yanaendaje. Yvonne.
Shukran sana. Thank you for letting us know. Aramat Lemaken from UDA is the MP-elect for Narok East constituency with 13,588 votes, beating Alfred Keriolale of ODM with 8,702 votes. We were talking about, of course, public participation and where we go with that with respect to what happens between elections. I just want to come back and talk about the numbers a little bit because we've just come off the numbers. Angela, the whole country is doing this, the pressure is oscillating, right? The numbers, I think, currently put Raila Odinga in the lead with 49.89%, right? And it's a very marginal one, with William Ruto at 48.8%, and this is what we've tallied. And when you watch different media houses, one is, leading, and then another. Just help us understand how we interpret these numbers. When is the time for supporters of one candidate or another to start celebrating or accepting the result? Because this is what you deal with every day,
right? Numbers.
Yeah. But I think a lot of us are, oh, my candidate was winning. Oh, my candidate is losing. Oh, what is happening? And it's just the up and down. How do we interpret these numbers that we're seeing at this point? And at what point will we now say we have a clearer picture of where things are going with the presidential vote specifically?
I think, Yvonne, first and foremost, your numbers right now, I think we can only focus on the numbers we're seeing on your screen.
Yeah.
You have, your numbers represent 7.3 million votes cast. We're estimating that there'll be about 14 million total votes. So that's 50% right now.
Yeah.
So the halfway mark. So your numbers are in a sense now reliable. Now what we normally try and do, or what we generally do, is look at it first in terms of representation. So where are these numbers coming from? Yeah. Are they representing every single place, which is a little difficult to tell from the wall right now? And then also, what is left in terms of the 50%? If the 50%, for instance, is more leaning towards the strongholds of one party or one candidate as opposed to the other, we could easily call the election. So if we say out of the half, most of them are in Rift Valley or they're in Central, we can say it's a done deal because it's half and half. If on the flip side, it's on the strongholds of Raila, again, we can say, well, if the 50% that's coming in will primarily be coming from Raila's strongholds, comparative to those of William Ruto, then the likelihood is that his numbers will tilt things and that he will, get an advantage. So those are things that I think right now are some, maybe, I don't know, but they're missing.
Well, what we can do, because it's difficult to tell, like you're saying, but look at, for instance, Elgeyo Marakwet, which is one of the strongholds of William Ruto. 496 polling stations have reported out of 554. So it's just about 58 that are yet to report.
Yeah.
If you look at a county like Nandi, 825 out of 927, that's 88% of the polling stations reporting. If you look at Uasin Gishu, 689 out of 958, almost 60-something%. Again, Bungoma, that is giving. No, that's
Bungoma
not.
Is still
that's
very
not
low.
a primary stronghold.
Yeah.
Let's look at Baringo, for instance, 867 out of 1029. That's almost 80-something% reporting.
Yeah.
But when you look at the strongholds of Raila Odinga, for instance, Migori, 789 out of 1014. That's almost a 78% reporting.
Right.
If you look at Homa Bay, 1123 out of 1227, that's almost a 90% reporting.
Right.
If you look at Siaya, 863 out of 1035, again, almost 80-something% reporting. If you look at Kisumu, 892 out of 1165 could be a 70-something%. So it's difficult to tell because both of their strongholds appear to be doing well in reporting.
Yeah, but then they have other places which have been predicted as strongholds.
Yes.
So you still also need to look at the mountain, and
okay.
you also need to look at coast and western.
Let's start with the mountain. Kirinyaga, 232 out of 697. That's like a third. If you look at Kiambu, 565 out of 2113. That's like, is it a quarter?
That's a quarter.
25%.
Yeah.
If you look at Muranga, 533 out of 1186, almost 50%.
Yeah.
Look at, this is Embu, 233 out of 747, almost a third, or 20%. If you look at Nyandarua, 264 out of 727, again, almost a third. If you look at Nakuru, 778 out of 2050, maybe at 30% or thereabout. So very low reporting, mountain area. But also if you look at Lower Eastern, 320 out of 1578, that's like 20%. If you look at Makueni, 515 out of 1129, almost 50%. If you look at Machakos, with a high voter population, 594 out of 1472, could be almost a third. If you look at the coast, for instance, in Mombasa, where usually the voter turnout is low, 547 out of 1041, that's like half. If you look at Kwale, 434 out of 742, more than half reporting. What does that tell you?
Yeah. Sam, what is the turnout now for Mombasa?
Mombasa, based on the stations tallied, is 20%. 20.
No. That is just, what is the voter turnout?
No, I can't tell that from here. I can only tell you the polling stations.
They haven't given us that rundown by county, eh?
No.
So we don't know. We just know the global 64%.
Yes.
Yes.
Aha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those figures you're saying about reporting, are those the ones that we or you have tallied, or are those the ones that you
No,
have?
the ones that we have tallied ourselves.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's a percentage of everything that we have reported. I just press the wrong button.
Yeah.
So I don't know that those.
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think we're going to see, we're halfway.
Yeah.
It will change plus or minus 1 or 2.
Yeah.
That it's not going to flip significantly
Right.
on either side. So it could change plus or minus 2 for Ruto, and it will change because of what you have done, some of them cancelling out because
Yeah.
they're strongholds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think your numbers are pretty reflective. And what we'll end up with in the morning is either a 1% up for Raila or a 1% up for William Ruto. One of them will get to 50
Sure.
and it's done.
You see that happen?
When
no chance of a runoff. A tough one.
I'm not a soothsayer,
Right.
but I'm thinking somebody will get to. Let me not say I'm thinking. I'm going to be subjective and say I'm hoping someone will get to 50 plus 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't have that high voter turnout, although it is over 50% in the first round, can you imagine what it's going to be in a runoff?
Yeah.
The repeat election in 2017, despite the challenges, was 38%.
Yeah.
You can imagine that. And then, you add on to, Kakamega and Mombasa that will be having their by-elections on the 23rd of August. And if you thought the turnout now is something that is becoming the big story of this election, imagine if we went into a runoff or a repeat election, if it came to it after a Supreme Court process. I just want to, stay on the numbers for a moment, because remember all of these Forms 34A are being uploaded onto the IBC portal. And this is, by the presiding officers. So currently, there are 46,022 forms that have been uploaded there. This is of 46,229. So that's about 207 forms left. That's 99.55% of the forms that are in. Of course, this might exclude Eldas constituency that was voting today. It will most likely also exclude, areas in Kakamega and Makueni. Remember, the IEBC then allowed the use of the manual register in 154 stations in Kakamega County and 84 stations in Makueni County. So we'll wait to see what those numbers are like. But clearly, IBC has everything it needs. And there's 100% reporting from a number of counties. When it comes to the Forms 34A, Bomet, Bungoma, Busia, Elgeyo Marakwet, Embu, Isiolo, Kericho, Kilifi, Kirinyaga, there's Mombasa as well as Murang'a, Nyamira, Nyandarua, Nyeri, Samburu, Siaya, and many others, whilst a good number of others are, 99, and, there's just a few left. And this is what now everybody is wondering, okay, so now that they have them all in, why can't they get to it already? In fact, there's a tweet from Ariane. Ariane says, IBC has put a link for downloading all the forms per county at once. The data clerk should now move with speed in tallying. So this is what the IEBC chair had said about making this final announcement. Many of us thought, well, the forms are in, so let's get counting already. So this is what he clarified. As per regulation, that even though they might have all the forms or 99% of them in the portal, they will have to wait for the returning officers to bring physically those Forms 34A to Bomas of Kenya, where they will go through the process of verifying. So you check that what was transmitted electronically matches with the physical. And they say that this verification process will be done in the presence of presidential party agents. For that, so that again, maybe the process that Koki had taken us through earlier, that means this will take some time because all the agents have to say, okay, from all of these polling stations, this is actually what tallies with what was electronically transmitted. And the chair said, only then will they begin the process of tallying. So that means we will wait quite a while.
It's going to be a while.
It's going to be a while, so a little bit more patience. Yes,
maybe I could just say something. We've just given the results for, was it Narok East?
Yes, correct.
If you take Narok East, for example, even if you have 100% of those forms, that returning officer, having declared those results, must then pack and leave Narok to come to Nairobi. So it will be 100 until they arrive here. Time at the tallying center does not start. Secondly, in 2013 in the Supreme Court, there was a whole debate about presidential agents of one of the parties being locked out at certain points in time. The reason why they must be there is to ensure that as you're talking about the forms, they can verify that these forms are similar to the ones that were raised at that place.
Right.
So people should recognize that even if we have 99% of the results in, the reason why IEBC has even said we will give you the next briefing tomorrow is that between when they talk to us and tomorrow morning, the best that can happen is that somebody may arrive. That's the best that can happen. There will be no possibility that they have finished verifying and that they can start announcing. So people should think about this process starting tomorrow. Remember, in Lamu, when you reported earlier, the people are saying, but there's such few votes, and we've not even finished. Yet those results from Lamu will have to arrive here. So people should start thinking about, this is not a 30 minutes, this is not a minute thing. This is hours.
But also, I think, but a lot of people raising questions and even questioning media houses. I mean, why are you too slow? Wafula Chebukati said you should be at 98%. Because it's a public portal, it may also be nice for Kenyans to also try. Download those 46,000 forms and see how far you can go.
Sam, as a number cruncher, I wouldn't even dare. I said yesterday, it's not my job. I pay taxes so somebody can do that.
Right.
So what you're doing is quite commendable as media houses. I think the two things that it's doing is it is alleviating the anxiety. Can you imagine if after voting, and you've always expected to see results trickling in, and you're not clear about all the things that good lawyers have been telling us, that for 2 days, you have no information. There's no map. There are no numbers.
Yeah.
I think
And then someone
people
comes
would
up and-
just be on tentacles, and the mood in the country would have been very stressful.
Correct.
So I think what the media has done is great. People don't understand that even to download that thing takes minutes. Then after you download it, you have to key it
Key
in.
in,
Yes.
And then after you key it in, you have to verify. Somebody has to verify just
what
like
you've done
that what you've
is
done is
correct.
correct
Yeah.
before you can transmit it here.
Yeah.
And then go to the next 46,000.
And go to the,
There you go. And I think the other thing as well, and this reminds me of, you remember when the late Samuel Kivutu, at some point in 2007, he said he didn't even know where his returning officers were. And it takes us back to, we have been here before, where there are certain aspects of the results that we're not able to verify. Because it's one thing to count, collate, tally, and then the most important bit is verifying. So what you've actually counted and said is it, you get a third eye that just sort of looks at it and says, okay, we're A-okay. And I think those are some of the things that we just have to be patient with, so that we have all the processes, crossing all your T's and checking all the I's. And this does take time. Can we do it faster? Perhaps. And, these are things that we learn, I guess, as we go, 2027, 2032. These are things that we will learn along the way. But, patience is key. And I remember when Wafula Chebukati said earlier today, there will be no result today. When a lot of us were thinking, oh, well, okay, let's have it. And he said, there will be no result happening today. And he did actually predict, Professor, what you've just said, that the returning officers would start to arrive at Bomas of Kenya this evening, the evening of the 10th.
Last evening.
We're now in the 11th, on the 11th of August, and that they would start arriving, that was Wednesday evening, and then
Right.
of course into Thursday, and then they begin that process of verifying. And you can see that there's just, a lot of caution and just making sure they get it right. Koki, you're smiling because...
Yvonne, just one question for Koki as
Yes.
an election observer. I mean, how did you receive the news of IBC a day before coming to communicate that ballot papers, there's a mix-up in Mombasa governorship, Kakamega governorship, Kacheliba, Pokot South, member of parliament. On the following day, there's a mix-up in Rongai parliamentary race, and they say that it is the printer was a problem. And I would think that before anything is printed, there's due diligence to be done by a commission, which is financed by the taxpayers' money. I mean, how does that settle down, and can it be an issue, especially after this is done?
Well, okay. Mix up of ballot papers is something that actually does happen, and it's something that is not intentional. It is true, before the ballot papers are printed, the commissioners even travel to the printer and verify whether these are the right candidates and so on and so forth. But you recall, for example, just before the closure of the nomination period for the candidate, there were all these court cases and all these challenges. Mara, this person is disqualified. Mara is brought back and so on. Of course, that not only delays the process, but it also causes mix-up. For example, if they are already included and this information relayed to the printer. And this is one of the problems that we have created for ourselves. The same way as the problem, and I'll comment on the results. But the problem is, for example, we don't trust our own local printers here. And because of that, it is not only expensive, but we have to print abroad. And therefore, small mistakes and things that can be verified locally take an entire flight to Europe. For example, it takes, 8 hours to fly to Europe, to Greece, to wherever.
To just check that the printing is done correctly, surely.
Imagine the Electoral Commission, placing a telephone call to a Greek person there and saying, oh, excuse me, Honorable Sonko has been removed from the list, and then the
or
guy,
Charity Ngilu stepped down, even though she's been gazetted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, imagine the conversation. Yeah. So they have to physically go there, and with all this documentation. And remember, we brought all these problems to ourselves by going to court and having all these stringent rules and all these millions of forms that have to be filled, all these procedures that have been followed, and even the announcement of results and everything. All these problems, it was brought by these same politicians. So they have to hold their peace and let the process to go through, because that is one of the problems with the mix-up. The court cases and all this information and having to print abroad. But also, when ballot papers arrive, they arrive, massive like that. You don't open them and start verifying again whether, is this the correct one? Or they come marked, packaged, and labeled.
Yeah.
So you deliver them. You deliver them to where they are.
Yeah, sorry, so I just want to ask, what would be the effect of them opening the batch to check that it is correct? Because, yes, and look at Prof has just looked at me like, because that's where I was heading, because once they open those ballot papers, can they not then be marked? You know what I'm saying?
They can't open for that same reason. You have answered your own question. And the law requires that they don't. Because can you imagine if the Electoral Commission receives ballot papers and starts verifying? I mean, the entire reason why they had to be printed abroad is defeated. But this, I mean, Kenyans, we have to grow towards a level of trust so that we can be able to print these ballot papers here. And like, for example, a ballot paper has eight
security features.
Are they 8
security? I think, 8. I think they are 8.
Yeah.
Well, the ones I counted, there could be more. And they are growing. They started with 1. They went to 2. They are growing and growing with every court case. So all these problems are the problems that we are bringing for ourselves and making it too complicated to run a simple election. For example, during Kivuito's time, the law required that we can have what we call provisional results.
Right.
So that this place where we are watching, they have 99.55% of 34 A's that have arrived. We would already be having what we call provisional results. And all this anxiety will not be with us. But because the same people who are asking Chebukati for quick results are the same people who went to the Supreme Court to say that you can't do that. So that's why we're having all these problems. And there's the mistakes, like, for example, people say, I'm being rigged in, or I'm very upset the election was cancelled here and there. But then if the election was conducted under those same mistakes, then you still also run to court. So you have to choose your, you have to choose. And lastly, I wanted to make a comment about Mheshimiwa Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka and his influence in not just in southeastern Kenya region, but also in areas of Kwale, in Nairobi, in Mombasa, in Taveta, in Mbere, in Mwea, and so on. I mean, the community has a lot of confidence and trust in him. You recall, in fact, Angela, you did a poll when he had not joined Azimio, and the entire region was totally undecided. They had not decided who they were going to vote for or what they were going to align themselves until he moved personally to that, coalition. So of course, when you cannot underestimate his power, and you cannot actually just, take him for granted, because I can tell you for sure that his influence in whatever coalition he is significant and would make serious changes in wherever he goes. So you don't play with his capacity to actually determine the direction of this election one way or the other.
Yeah, interesting on that. Listen, we're also, like we said, getting what's happening with